Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I've got 3 independent horror books that I've recently read. They're all really excellent and I can recommend them all to you heartily. And I'm going to be talking about all 3 of those. And if you like this video, check out my links down below. I have links to my books in the description and some other stuff down there as well. You might want to check out, see what you can find. Alright, let's get on with the video. Alright, so the first book I want to talk about today is called Ghostland by Duncan Ralston. This is actually a trilogy. However, I've only read the first book in this trilogy, but the link in the description if you want to purchase it is for the omnibus, so you can buy all 3 at once for a very low price. And based on this first book, I can highly recommend it. This is about a couple of people who go to a new amusement park that's open called Ghostland. In this world, ghosts are real, and there's some very evil spirits in there. A man who was a successful, very rich horror writer when he was alive is now dead, but part of his inheritance is going to build this place, and there are safety measures in place so the guests can interact with the ghosts without having to worry about being injured. Until something happens to that safety system, and then it is a bloodbath when these ghosts are unleashed on a park full of people, and as body parts are flying left and right and the blood is gushing from everywhere, our 2 main protagonists can't leave. They're basically locked in and they have to figure out a way to survive this massacre and figure out a way to get out of this park before it's too late. On top of that whole supernatural element, this relationship between the 2 characters I really liked, because they were friends for a while when they were younger. Then something happened, I'm not going to say what, made them drift apart. But now they're back together just to come to this opening of this Ghostland because they're both into the supernatural kind of things. So as their relationship is kind of still rocky, they have to figure out a way to get along, resolve past issues, and make it out of there alive. They will meet other survivors along the way, but whether these people are going to actually be trying to help them or have more nefarious purposes in mind, well, you're going to have to read to find out. But this was an excellent book. It's filled with action, filled with blood and gore. And like I said, it's part of a trilogy, so there's more waiting for you once you get done with the first one. And you can find the link for that in the description. And the second book I want to talk about today is called Manxxiety by Damon Manx. This is an anthology, and it's available on April 27th, so just a few days away, and you can pick up your copy. This is an interesting anthology because this author has led a very interesting life, and most of the stories in this book he has taken from his own personal life and then added his literary horror twist on it and made for some damn good storytelling. He really knows how to build tension in these stories and makes you want to keep reading it to the very end to find out how it's going to turn out. And there are all different kinds of stories in here. There's something for everyone. The first story is about a boy who's riding a bike. He gets hit by a car and he suffers some horrible injuries to his head and to his leg, but we see it from his perspective. He's the one who's telling the story about why this happened and how it happened and how he feels, and that was taken right out of this author's own life. He was that boy in the road. And then there's another story about a GPS system in a car. The guy that's driving it is a real douchebag, one of those kind of guys, but the GPS system kind of gets a mind of its own and starts talking to him, becoming sentient, telling him what a douchebag he is. And to stress the point, this system starts taking control of the car itself. So he really has no control over the car, as this GPS system is telling him what a complete tool he is for what he's been doing and what he's doing now. And I love these stories about AI gone amok. It's just a new favorite trope of mine because there's so much there to explore, and this one was absolutely perfect. And there's also one about a few coming-of-age stories about kids going to a haunted location to sit there and have a few beers. You know how teenagers are. Things do not go well there. And one about a ritual about jumping off a cliff into a body of water. as it's sort of a ritual for the kids in this town. And a sixth grader decides he's going to be the first sixth grader to ever do this, but the consequences are going to be horrific. There's all kinds of stories in here, even a couple that aren't actually horror, but they do come from the author's real life, and they are very well told, very engaging stories. Like I said, he's had quite a life. You'll learn about that if you read the back of the book after the stories are done. Give you a little insight into this author. And it's a great anthology. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. And you can pre-order it at the link in the description. And last but certainly not least is this book by Jeremiah Duncan. This concerns a boy who, his family has supernatural gifts. They can speak to the dead via seances and Ouija boards. But his father will not allow that in his house because his father was ostracized as a child for believing in these things. So he shut it all out of his mind, refuses to acknowledge it or talk about it. But this boy's grandmother is definitely into that sort of thing. And so when he goes to stay with her for a little while, she teaches him how to do these things with a Ouija board and with the seances to communicate with the dead. And he picks it up rather nicely. But then things take a very, very twisted psychopathic turn as we find out that this young boy might be a little bit of a sociopath. He doesn't see it that way. He thinks he's a scientist, he's expanding knowledge. But when his grandmother dies and he needs her assistance so badly, he spends years. And this all takes place like in 1899 and 1900, early 1900. And he can't seem to communicate with his grandmother after she dies, which frustrates him to no end. So he thinks an experiment is in order, and that is to kill people, and as they die, communicate with their spirits to tell his grandmother that he's trying to communicate with them. And things go off the rails, bodies start piling up. He thinks he's better and more sophisticated and smart than anybody else, but we're soon going to learn that, well, every dog has his day sooner or later, you know what I mean? But it's a very well-told story. It comes from a journal an urban explorer found many years later in an old abandoned building. So it's kind of like a found footage kind of story in that respect. But it's very good, very effective, very creepy. It's a combination of supernatural, because these things do happen. They can communicate with the dead. But it's also about this kid who turns into this, basically a serial killer. And he thinks he's just doing it for science. He sees nothing wrong with this. He doesn't think he's a murderer, even though, well, some very gruesome evidence will conclude otherwise. But yeah, I definitely recommend this book. And again, you can find it at the link in the description. So there you have 3 indie horror books I've recently read that I can highly recommend to you. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments if you want. I'm always happy to get suggestions from you guys. And if I read a book, if I take your suggestion and read a book and I like it, I will be talking about it on this channel, and I'll try to give you a shout out for being the one to let me know about it. And as always, I want to say thank you for taking some of your time and spending it here with me. And until we meet again, keep reading spooky, my friends.